because Zoom does put a time limit on these. So thanks for coming out to this event. The date is wrong, but that's okay. This is about forest invasive species and management. This would be great if you wanted to look this up later and follow along while going on some hikes or checking out your local park, because you can probably identify some of these. So first, what are invasive species? They are typically imported plants, sometimes animals, but for this, we're going to focus on plants that have a competitive advantage over the native species. So native in this instance would be Eastern American, Northeastern American plants. Obviously, what's native is going to change depending on what region you're in. Invasive species are typically characterized by having a multitude of characteristics. One that people seem to debate about is the high cost to remove or control plants, whether or not they have a high cost to remove. I personally still think they might be invasive. All plants might have a high cost to remove, whether or not they could be invasive. So I also want to bring up the Indiana Invasive Species Council. They were established to enhance the ability of government agencies to monitor and just protect the native species in the area. The IISC has determined a rank for all invasive species. That rank will determine the level of control that species needs. They also point out the legal status. Some invasive species do have a legal status, which is a legal code regulating the plant and how to remove it or how to not grow it. The first plant I want to bring up, and one that you probably see often, is Asian bush honeysuckle. You'll know it's one of those plants that smell quite sweet when it blooms. It's typically very popular when it does because it just has such a sweet, strong, sweet smell. They are upright shrubs. You'll notice they're arching. They're quite beautiful. More beautiful in their native environment, which is East Asia. They have red to orange berries that are easily dispersed by birds. That's one of the things that makes them highly invasive here. You'll also notice Japanese honeysuckle. It has that same sweet smell when it blooms. Very similar plants. Here we have a closer view of the leaves. You can see the leaves are pretty symmetrical and they are quite veiny. The difference is the stems on Japanese honeysuckle can have a little bit of dark red or purplish hue. These also grow a little bit lower to the ground. These are a prohibited invasive terrestrial plant by the IISC. So some honeysuckle removal techniques include spraying with vinegar and water. This is something you can do at home, specifically if you don't want to use strong or harsh chemicals around the home. It takes some time, but it can be done. You can add a little bit of Dawn dish soap, and that will help kind of just cut through the leaves. You can also physically remove the plant by the roots. It can take a lot of work because, as we know, roots can spread, take up a lot of space. Additionally, if you have like an acre or more of land, it might be time to call in a professional to get just a series of honeysuckle plants removed. They can bring in machines to physically remove the plants. They can also do a coordinated technique to spray the plants at a cycle, prevent them from regrowing. Burning bush is one you might also commonly see. It gets those gorgeous red flowers. However, it is not native. Because we plant it so much in our landscaping plans, it has become an invasive species. The branches are brown, they are dense, and they are sturdy, which makes it really easy to survive in our environment. This does have a high IISC rank, but it has no legal code preventing us from using it, at least in Indiana. Winter creeper is one of those vines you will commonly see. It is a ground cover. It can grow up just like many of the other vines, but you'll commonly see it along the ground in flower beds, particularly in wooded residential lawns. It spreads by rhizomes. Rhizomes are roots that spread horizontally throughout the soil, and then the new stems will poke through that soil surface. It has a high IISC rank, and it is a prohibited plant. So if you're looking for ground cover, I would not suggest this one. Also, another vine is English ivy. It is another ground cover that can grow up. You'll commonly see it growing on houses. It can be quite beautiful. However, it can cause damage to trees. It can cause some damage to your home. It also spreads through rhizomes, so it's really hard to kill. The IISC rank on this one is medium. It does not have a code governing it. For the ivies, it is typically best to, if you're home and you want to use, you need some common herbicides to get rid of them, you can try vinegar again. You can also physically just pull them and dig them out of the soil. These can take a lot of work to remove, depending on their scale. Another one is privet. It can get confusing. It kind of looks like honeysuckle if you notice the leaves and the flowers on the left. However, the flowers on privet are clumped, where the flowers on honeysuckle are not. You can kind of see that in the picture in the lower left corner. These are native to Europe. They're here to be used as a hedge. However, they are now a prohibited invasive plant because the rank is high by IISC. Garlic mustard. You might know this one. There are a lot of efforts to remove this. I know Girl and Boy Scouts of America have put forth efforts to work on removing this. The best way to really get rid of this is to just pull. You also might know that this one kind of smells like mustard when you crush it or otherwise damage the plant. It has small clumping flowers, but what's really characteristic is that big leaf. It's kind of, once they get really big, they kind of cup. It is a prohibited plant as well. Unfortunately, like I said, the best way to kind of get rid of it is just pull it from the ground. I will note this is a perennial, so it has a 2-year growth cycle. The first year it's harder to identify because it just grows low to the ground. You just get little discs. It looks incredibly different the second year when it starts to bloom. However, you want to pull it in that first year for it to really be effective. Periwinkle is another just gorgeous plant that unfortunately does have an IISC rank of medium. It is not prohibited, but it is invasive. It also has leaves similar to honeysuckle and privet a little bit. It's also from East Asia. So all of these just kind of come from the same area. It is nearly an evergreen here, which really gives it that ability to just spread and grow at an incredibly fast pace. Another invasive plant here is hemlock. It is a European native. This one has gorgeous flowers. It kind of looks like Queen Anne's lace. However, it is not Queen Anne's lace, and this plant can in fact be a little dangerous if you were to get the sap on your skin or to otherwise damage the plant and have that rub on your skin. It can be an irritant, especially in the sun. Obviously, you don't want to ingest it either. Its nickname is poison hemlock. So if you do want to remove this, I would suggest being incredibly careful. It is a perennial or a biennial plant. It's a member of the parsley family, so it can look like some of the wild carrots that we have native here. The difference is this grows tall and it has a stem that's spotted with purple specks. Another invasive plant that's super common is Teasel. You will see this almost all over. You can be driving down the road and you'll see it on the side of the road. It's got a purple cone at the top and it just has really kind of long pointed leaves growing out of the stem. This is a prohibited invasive plant as well, and it has a high IISC rank. This one is one that typically takes coordinated efforts to remove. Thistle, it kind of looks like Teasel, the last one we spoke about. It is a perennial weed as well. It has spiny leaves, as you can see in the photo, and it has a flower that kind of comes out of a cone. So that flower can really help you differentiate between these two plants. This is a noxious weed per IC, which is Indiana Code 15.3.4.6. So that gives it its high ranking. This one also typically takes coordinated efforts to remove. When they're young, you can just pull both these last two plants, you can just pull them out of the ground before they get too spiky. Kudzu Vine, this is another vine. It kind of looks like grapevine, which is a native vine, so you want to be careful if you do go to remove it. This one does have gorgeous flowers. It's an East Asian native, which is where a lot of our invasive species come from, typically because they were revered as gorgeous plants. This is known as the vine that ate the South. It was brought in for a lot of erosion control on the sides of roads, just wherever that erosion control might be needed. And it just spread. It took over. Like, it is really gorgeous. You can see the flowers, they are clumped together, but it is an invasive species. It will take over your yard if given the opportunity. It has a high IISC rank, and this is another vine that can be killed with vinegar if you're looking for an at-home effort. Another one you'll see commonly in people's yards, especially in a lot of the new subdivisions being developed, is the Calorie Pear, commonly known as the Bradford pear. It is typically the first tree to flower in spring. You might know this one because it is known as a stinky tree. It is another East Asian native. Yeah, and like I said, you'll see this all over. It's on college campuses, it's in new subdivisions. I've seen it at local libraries. It's everywhere. The leaves do kind of look like honeysuckle, so when it is young, you have to be careful to not confuse the two. However, they're both invasive, so spraying them is okay. Another tree to pay attention to is the tree of heaven. It is another native to China, and it is known by a number of names, including sumac, Chinese sumac, varnish tree, and stink tree. This plant, it also releases a strong smell, but it is typically not planted in places where people are commonly walking. So that is not as known. This tree, the newer leaves have almost red tips. So it really looks like the tips of the tree are just reaching up, which is how it gets its name, Tree of Heaven. This tree is particularly damaging because it just aggressively grows. It has aggressive roots that can damage sidewalks, sewer systems, piping, any other piping that you may have underground. This one does not have a rank. However, it is one to pay attention to because it can be so damaging to our built environment. So the ecological impact of invasives is one important thing I would like to touch on. Invasives can choke out our native species. They will obviously need their own resources to survive, such as nutrients, moisture, and sunlight. But because native species don't have any predators, anything to really prevent them from growing, they can be so prolific and thus grow faster than the native species, damage the environment for those native species. Non-native plants do not provide native animals and insects the same nutritional value. They can provide value, but it's not going to be the same quality as those native insects and animals need. So general removal tips, I touched on this a little bit as we were going through. One of the best things to do at home is just get that vinegar and water and start spraying things or physically remove things. Most plants can be spotted young. They can just be pulled out by the roots. Super simple, doesn't require a lot of effort. You can get over-the-counter herbicides such as spectricide, There's a couple others that can just be picked up from your local hardware store, and those will generally work. If you have large plants on your property or you have a large property, you probably need a coordinated effort, which usually involves a professional. You could do it on your own. However, it might take longer. You could risk the native species in the area, which just provides additional avenues for those invasive species to grow. I do want to say a special thanks to Lisa Dunaway and Kyle Johnson. They did help put together some of the common invasive species that are in the area. They are native pollinator yard homeowners, the Delaware County Soil and Water District and the Grant County Soil and Water Conservation District. They are providing the grants that help allow these educational events to take place. With that, if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them.